President Trump appears to be losing confidence in nuclear negotiations with Iran as the talks drag on and on and on. He says he's less confident in cementing a deal now. The president also says that Iran has become more aggressive in nuclear negotiations as frictions build between the two nations. Meanwhile, Iran has made explicit threats against American bases if the talks fail and if conflict ensues. According to the president, the next round of talks is scheduled for tomorrow, but some have reported that it's unlikely. After all, what's left to talk about? Well, here to discuss this and more, Congressman Scott Perry, who serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the Select Subcommittee on Intelligence. He represents the 10th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. He's also a combat veteran who retired at the rank of Brigadier General. Congressman, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always good to see you.
Well, it's great to be with you, Tony, and thanks for the opportunity. And I would just say we should not be surprised by Iran's posture and kind of the condition or the stage of where the talks are at this point. What they're doing is they're just playing for time, as they always do. I'm going to tell you, it's my opinion that they have absolutely no intention of changing course. And unfortunately, much of the world has characterized, including the United States, their nuclear program is something other than a weapons program. It is specifically and only a weapons program. And the first part of figuring out a problem or finding a solution is identifying what the problem is. And if you can't even do that, it's hard to find a solution. So I think that President Trump is right to grow weary and not as optimistic about the conversation, because I would say the Iranians have no intention whatsoever of walking back from their nuclear ambitions, and it's going to take something more than talk to get them there.
It appears that they have dug in on the issue of being able to continue to enrich uranium at a low level, as they say, for nuclear power plants. They say that's a non-starter. They're not going to give that up.
Yeah, but they don't need to be enriching at any level, and nor can they be trusted. That's the problem. You can't trust the Iranians, the mullahs, the supreme leader. You can't trust them because their doctrine requires that they lie to advance the cause of Allah. And so you can't trust them. There's no reason for them to enrich for what they can buy on the open market. And the only reason they want to continue to do it is to continue with their weapons program under the guise of a civilian program.
Congressman Perry, they have threatened. I mean, these are very explicit threats. They're not veiled. They say we will target all U.S. bases in host countries without hesitation if these talks break down and if there is any type of attack on their nuclear program, whether it's by the U.S. or by Israel. What is their capacity, and how significant of a threat is that?
Well, they do have a capacity currently, and it is a threat. However, I would say this. They have been diminished more so than ever in the recent during the 6 months of the Trump administration, more so than they have been over the last 5 years. They have their proxies have been decimated. They have lost ground in Yemen, in Syria, and of course with Israel. So they are at the most enfeebled state probably in the last 20 years militarily. That having been said, I'm sure they're going to issue the threat. But I would also say that if there is a strike, to bring them into line with national norms and to avert the possibility of a terrorist nuclear attack, that it's going to also at the same time decimate their ability to deliver any conventional attack of any size on American interest or on Israeli interests. I think they know that, and I'm sure that's part of the calculation for any preemptive strike that might be being considered right now.
Well, I would think that what might also have to factor into their calculation is if they attack U.S. targets after a precision strike on nuclear facilities, there's going to be a response from the United States, which could lead then to a regime change, because that's really the next thing for them, is that their regime is teetering already.
Their regime is teetering. Like I said, they're at their weakest point in decades now, not only militarily, certainly economically, but also as a governing body. The Iranian people, many of them seeking their freedom and don't want to live under this this oppressive theocratic dogma. And all there needs to be, look, there have been plenty of sparks, as you know, unfortunately, whether it was the Biden administration or the Obama administration, just disregarded the will of the Iranian people to throw off their shackles of tyranny. But that spark still exists there, and left with an opening of a window of opportunity open. Like you said, the Iranian regime is really gambling with their future by walking into this space. And I think that the right person to press this is President Trump right now. Needs caution, it needs resolve and patience, but he should push this to the maximum limit. Maximum pressure will either get the Iranians to back down or, like you said, will likely end up in regime change.
Congressman Scott Perry, I want to shift gears to another place where negotiations have stalled. That is the president wanting to see peace in Eastern Europe between Ukraine and Russia. As time goes on, and I think we're both probably in the same place. I don't think America can be the world's policeman. We can't be, and we shouldn't be. We can't afford to be fighting all these different fights or funding other people's fights. Right. But over time, it's become quite clear who the aggressor is. I mean, Russia invaded Ukraine. But right. Even the way they're executing the war. I mean, just this week, largest drone strike from Russia, targeting, once again, civilian populations, hitting a maternity ward. Right. Much different than Ukraine.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Of course, Ukraine is fighting for its life, and in the fight for its life against the aggressor, which is Russia, unprovoked attack, as you recall, several unprovoked attacks starting in Crimea, but then further advancing. Ukraine has targeted military installations and military targets, albeit inside Russia, but they're still military targets. Of course, Russia's answer is to attack civilian targets, including a maternity ward. And so, look, I think that the war in Ukraine is potentially reaching a whole new stage of accusations of war crimes and crimes against humanity, and it's going to require a different and a new response, not only from the United States, Tony, but from the rest of the civilized world. We simply can't abide these kind of things, and again, Russia is the aggressor. Ukraine is just trying to defend its own sovereign territory, which has been invaded unprovoked. And I think that the president's patience is coming to an end.
You know, there are tools that we can use besides the military. There are economic levers. In fact, the Senate entertaining sanctions on Russian oil. I mean, that is what's funding their war machine. Is that something we should aggressively pursue?
Yes, I do think we should aggressively pursue that. The president has been patient. He's backed down President Zelensky on the ceasefire issue and America's involvement with Ukraine. So he's gotten him to a place where, you know, he's willing to accept some terms from Russia, but Russia seems unwilling at this point to do anything but press the attack and try to gobble up more territory. And, you know, at some point, you can't keep on extending the hand of reconciliation and having it slapped away. At some point, the president is going to have to go to the next level. And with these recent attacks, especially on things like maternity awards and civilian populations, I think that's a signal that Russia is disinterested, doesn't have any interest whatsoever in curtailing their aggressive activities. You're going to have to bring them to the table some way. And it's either going to be diplomatically, economically, or militarily. We've been trying the diplomatic approach through Ukraine with the military approach. The only thing really left is the economic approach. And I'm fairly certain that the president, those options lay on the table. And the question is when is that going to happen?
Congressman, we just have about a minute and a half left. What else can the United States do? I mean, again, all of us are reluctant to get involved in conflicts and wars, but clearly we're seeing a difference in worldview between these two countries and how they're executing the war. We see religious crimes, I think, by Russia as they go into these occupied areas and they're actually exporting the pastors, closing down the churches. What else can we do to stand on the side of Ukraine?
Well, the other thing we can do to stand on the side of Ukraine is provide the rest of the world with low-cost energy that Russia is currently providing. The United States has an abundance of it, and we can really, even without sanctions, drive down the cost of this energy that they're using to support not only the war, but their economy, and make them suffer economically, make Vladimir Putin suffer economically. You don't want to do that to the Russian people. Unfortunately, they have elected their leader. He's chosen to attack their neighbor, and there has to be a consequence to that. And that is not only good for the people of Ukraine, but also, quite honestly, the rest of the world and America itself. So I think that's a policy that we should really pursue. We have the resources, we have the know-how, and again, I don't see a lot of downside to doing that for the United States of America.
Not at all. It creates American jobs. It helps out the global economy and our economy at the same time. Congressman Scott Perry, always great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. God bless you.